If it feels like you've been paying more for food in the grocery store and at restaurants, it's because you have been. Prices on some things are up more than others. Why and what can we expect in the coming months? Let's find out from Mike von Massow, Ontario Agricultural College Chair in Food System Leadership and an Associate Professor in Food Agriculture and Resource Economics at the University of Guelph, where we find him tonight. And in the provincial capital, Avni Shah, Professor of Marketing at the University of Toronto and a Research Fellow at Behavioural Economics in Action at Rotman. Hi to you both.
Hello.
So before we started taping, I shared with both of you that the other day I try not to buy coffee, and I went to the coffee place and I bought a croissant, and it was very, very expensive. And Mike, I think a lot of consumers feel like they're spending more on food, even if they haven't compared their grocery bills from, say, 2 years ago. Is that pinch consumers are feeling? Is that real?
Yeah, there's no doubt we're seeing food prices go up. For a variety of reasons, and we can't make a sweeping statement. This is why they're going up. We're seeing some lingering pandemic effects, things like supply chain constraints that we're still hearing about that are causing imports to be slower. We're having some issues in the domestic market, like the drought in Western Canada, which are also putting pressure on. And I think if we look forward, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if we look forward, there's also an indication that things could get tighter before they get better.
Why is that?
Well, I think if you look at the drought in Western Canada and the Western US, we're seeing yields down substantially. When supply goes down, price goes up. We're also seeing, because of this acute dry weather, cattle herds are being cut, and that means that those cows won't have calves next spring, and so those supply impacts in the beef market are persistent. So we'll probably see those going forward. We're also seeing record low levels of water in reservoirs along the Colorado River and in California, and that's where we get a lot of our winter produce. So if we struggle to irrigate some of those crops, supply will go down, price will go up again. So there are a variety of things that are putting pressure in the retail store, and the same thing is happening in restaurants. We're seeing prices go up, COVID impacts, food costs are going up. Labor costs are going up because they're having trouble attracting staff. So there are this sort of myriad impacts that are conspiring to raise prices all at the same time.
We're gonna get into more of that in a few moments. But Mike, you mentioned cattle. Is it fair to say then that meat has gone up the most?
Well, I think we've seen meat go up quite a bit. We've seen several livestock products go up. Some of the dairy products have gone up, in the 5 to 8% range as well. But the, individual products that are also imported have also gone up. So I would say meat is a big one, but it is not the only one by any means.
And Avni, how do you think consumers are reacting to the increase in their grocery bills?
Certainly, it's changing the way people shop, right? So people are reducing meat purchases. They had already been reducing meat purchases prior to the pandemic and shifting a little bit more to these meat substitutes, such as the Beyond Meat burgers or Impossible Meat. But we're seeing even a greater reduction now that they're shifting over, to produce and fish and poultry. Because of these issues. And you also see many consumers shifting over to using coupons, as well as even choosing to purchase products that are on sale because they're closer to the expiration date.
Or so for example, if the meat's expiring today, I'll buy it today instead of buying it a few days before?
That's right, because it's a little bit cheaper in price. And another issue, too, is we're seeing people then shift their habits accordingly to see what is on sale this week, right, and what's not, and shifting accordingly. And I'm also hearing a lot of stories, and we're seeing basically people are going out less frequently to the restaurants, which is, makes sense given kind of this complete kind of price increase across the market.
What about vegetables? Because I know vegetables are kind of higher in the grocery store. What are they doing? How are they being impacted?
Yeah, so sir, one thing that's interesting that Mike also was mentioning as well is that it's not that it's a kind of a blanket price increase. You see basically certain products. So we saw the corn, for example, and avocado are increasing in prices. But then you see other things such as carrots or onions or potatoes. They are actually reducing in prices. And so we're seeing people substitute in different ways as a reaction to kind of penny pinching and being budget conscious. And I would say this is not, a vegetable per se, but for all those college undergraduates, pasta prices have also gone down. And so that's been a particular shift for certain consumers as well.
And Mike?
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. And what we're seeing is historically people have been very much buying the same thing regularly, and we're seeing people trade between categories, as Avni said. But I also think we're seeing people trade within categories. So while overall meat consumption is down, we also see people say, well, I won't buy the expensive cuts anymore. I'll move towards the lower cuts. So the relative demand for some of these products is changing as well.
And Avni, Mike mentioned that this might be something that is long-term that we see happening. How will that impact consumer behavior in the long run?
Well, I think there are two big shifts right now. So first, I think one of the struggles is that it's hurting the folks who have struggled the most during the pandemic, right? People who have lower income, who are now having to shift away from even grocery stores and now actually move into sort of food donation lines. And so that's going to be even tougher for many people as the price increases and as the forecasts are that the grocery prices are going up. I think another shift is that, again, we're seeing people move away from eating out as frequently. And one thing that's been interesting is that historically, people have just responded to price increases by just taking it, right? And understanding that it's sort of the nature of things. But the last couple of years with the pandemic has shifted consumer preferences and consumer habits such that people are used to now eating at home. They're used to then inviting people over and cooking and having meals together in that way. And so now you're seeing that people are saying, well, I'm not going to go out to the restaurant as frequently because I can make these particular goods and there's particular meals, like even the basics, like a burger and fries, I can do that at home now. And I, let's say got the air fryer. And so we're seeing those big shifts in this way. And I think that's going to continue as we move on in the course of the rest of this year and into 2022.
I wanted to follow up on two things that Avni mentioned, Mike. When we do talk about what she's just said about people deciding to stay home and cook for themselves because prices have gone up, that's not great news for restaurants which are already struggling. But she also mentioned people who are food insecure. I think the last stat that I saw, 1 in 8 people in Canada are food insecure. With the food prices going up, how is that impacting those families?
Well, I think exactly what Avni said is that we're seeing the people who are at most risk get squeezed the most. There are also people who rent, and we've heard rent prices go up. And so while as Canadians generally we pay a relatively small proportion of our annual income on food, those that are food insecure, that's a much bigger chunk. So they're having to make much starker choices. And while many people might substitute, go out a little less or things like that, people who are food insecure have to make choices about eating less because they have they don't have the sort of flexibility within their budget. So these food price increases are most acute for those with lowest income because they have less flexibility. They have less ability to substitute within their budget.
And Avni?
And I think the struggle is then compounded, right? So now you're making these trade-offs of, well, do I pay this bill, right? Do I feed, maybe my cat or my dog? How about taking care of these medicines, right? Do I actually then spend the extra $5, $10, $15, $20 on this medicine, or just basic standard of living issues? And so it really gets challenging. It's something that we need to pay attention to because also the donation lines are getting longer and longer. And so they're running out of food as well. And so we have to pay attention to these things because, obviously people deserve just a particular standard of care and standard of living that we want to make sure that we afford them.
We mentioned restaurants a couple of times, and restaurants have had a few really difficult years, and the ones that have survived so far have to pay more for a significant part of their business. How difficult is it simply now for restaurants to pass on that additional cost onto consumers and customers? Mike?
Well, I think restaurants are feeling pain right now, and so there is considerable worry or hesitation to pass some of these costs on, but they have to pass some of these costs on. I mean, we're seeing restaurants that are closed early or not open as many days because they can't get staff. Staff is costing them more. Food is costing them more. PPE is costing them more. They have fewer people they can put in a restaurant because capacities are down, so overheads are spread over fewer customers. They really don't have a choice. And I think many consumers understand that the expectation is that restaurant prices go up. But again, as those prices go up, people are going out a little bit less, and so demand goes down. They're caught sort of in this vicious cycle of, I have to raise prices, but raising prices may decrease my demand. And I think, again, as we get further into the cooler weather, we're also going to see fewer people willing to sit on patios, and are people more and more comfortable to be sitting inside. I think that many restaurants are in a real quandary, and we'll probably see some do well, and unfortunately, I think we'll see a few more fall by the wayside.
Avni, I wanted to ask you the same question because I have two kids, and cooking every day can be, maybe it's a first world problem, yes, but sometimes I just want to break, I want to eat out, I want to support our local businesses in my community. How difficult is it to pass on these additional costs that restaurants now have onto their customers who are trying to support those businesses?
It's very typical because I mean, there's just, that is the way things go, because other restaurants have to meet margins. And if prices are going up between 5 and 20% for different items, then we can't expect the prices to be the same. Now, there was one study that showed that basically the prices at restaurants have increased so sharply, and it hasn't actually been as sharp of an increase since like 1981. And there was a survey that I was just recently reading of 4,000 restaurant owner operators, and 91% were seeing this significant up to 20% increase in their food prices. And so and 75% of them were forced to change their menus as a result, because they wanted to keep prices at least, within striking distance of what consumers expect. And I think one of the interesting things psychologically for consumers is that while we can see at the grocery store, we don't expect to be kind of price gouged per se. You go to a restaurant and you're maybe nostalgic or remembering a price to be a particular amount, or at least saying, oh, I remember paying about $20 for an entree and maybe just a simple beverage like a soda. And now all of a sudden it's 25% higher. And so you're sitting there saying, well, what are they doing here? And you're getting more frustrated about this. And you don't play that same game of saying, oh, maybe the grocery prices have increased. And so psychologically, you're making a little bit of an attribution error. And you're increasingly seeing people say things like, well, the restaurant's gouging me. How could they do this? They're scaring away their customers, which is at odds with the fact that you're going to grocery stores and saying, hey, look, prices are more expensive as well.
So are customers then, do you find, are they shifting their behavior in the sense that they might tip less?
Yeah, I mean, that's been an interesting thing. That's where it's like, that's the only control I have. And so that's where we're seeing unfortunate changes there, which is really a shame because on one hand, yeah, wages are going up for restaurant employees, but that's because just life prices are going up as well. And so it's, it would be kind of unreasonable to say that people don't deserve, an increase because inflation is the way it is. And again, there was probably corrections that need to be made earlier. But then, I mean, for many people, they're expecting around a 15%, right? For many of the staff, they're expecting around a 15% tip. And now people are saying, well, I'm going to give you 2%. I'm not going to tip. One of my friends recently has, working for like Uber Eats, and she's like, rarely do I get a tip, and tipping the driver or the kind of the cyclist. And so that's actually quite difficult if that's what you're relying on. That was a supplemental source of her income, but imagine for many people that's just a whole shift in the kind of expected salaries that people are now having to deal with.
Mike, I saw you wanted to get in on this.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing really is when I'm talking to restaurateurs, we're seeing a greater variability. There's without a doubt some people who are saying, look, prices are going up, I can't afford to tip. Other people are sort of responding to the pandemic and saying, we understand these people have been out of work for a long time and have been shut down. So in some cases, I've spoken to some restaurateurs that tipping is actually up. So what I think we're seeing is sort of much greater variability between individual consumers, which makes it tough for a server or someone to know exactly what to expect at the end of a shift.
We only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to shift gear for a second and talk about grocery stores themselves. Grocery stores make their money on the volume of food they sell to consumers, and in Canada, we have a very competitive grocery market. Mike, can you tell us about the additional fees that grocery stores charge to suppliers and how they impact prices?
Well, we're seeing grocery stores. We've heard for a long time that grocery stores charge listing fees. They charge manufacturers to be in certain positions on the table, on the shelves, how much shelf space they get. Over the last year, we've heard some of the grocery companies talk about, well, we're having to increase our investment in online, and rather than pass that on to consumers, we are going to charge our processors an increased fee. Now, that hasn't been universal, but doing that essentially passes costs back to processors, and they're not going to be able to take that long term. And what it does is it spreads those cost increases across all retailers, not just the retailers that are putting these charges on consumers. So we're hearing lots of people on calls for a code of conduct so that we have a consistent behavior, that some of these large grocery chains can't sort of leverage their market power for access to their consumers. And so what we're seeing is those charges will eventually make all processors raise their prices, and grocery prices will go up everywhere. So it's hard for me to say, well, I agree that if company A is investing in a bigger online ordering environment, that everyone should pay more. That's a strategic decision they should make individually.
Avni, do you think consumers know about these fees?
No, right? I mean, this is always the case, right? So, I mean, we've even done studies with adding taxes, for example, and different amounts of taxes, and in particular, you could think of this what Mike is describing as almost a value-added tax of sorts. And people don't even notice these particular things. They see the end of their grocery bill, and then they make these attributions. They don't know where it's exactly coming from. Now, imagine a world where these fees were then made salient to a consumer. Again, this is an imaginary world, but then imagine if you say, okay, actually, this is the price that you should have paid, but these are the other grocery fees, then it actually can maybe prevent some of this kind of bargaining power differences between particular types of powerhouse grocery stores versus maybe the smaller chains. And so consumers are not aware. They just see the end price, and then they're just having to react to that. And they don't know where it's coming from, whether it's because the suppliers are now having to pay a particular amount because of climate issues, because of worker strikes, because the cost of wooden pallets has now gone up and there's a shortage there. All they see is that final price and making decisions on that.
Do you think they would change their behavior if they knew about those fees?
I think not everyone, because of course you step into a grocery store and then it's not like, people are pressed for time. So it's not like they're going to be shifting into different stores, and maybe not at the point of purchase itself. But would that shift if I know that I go to one grocery store that's basically pinching my suppliers versus another grocery store that's maybe having and I'm going to use this gently, but the fair deal? Then yeah, I think that would be the case, because it's about, I think consumers are looking for what kind of stores and what kind of businesses align with their values, and wanting to make sure that across the board that things are fair. right? And people, of course, expect there were going to be price increases and that's going to be passed on to them. But what is fair is, and that perception of fairness, I think, is incredibly important to consumers, particularly in this day and age.
Mike, we have 30 seconds left.
Well, and I think grocery stores think so, because some grocery stores have come out explicitly and said, we are not going to charge those fees. We're not going to raise those fees. So they wouldn't be making those announcements if they didn't think that that was going to differentiate themselves in the market.
Thank you both for your time tonight. I know, moving from the UK, my husband was shocked because in the UK, the taxes are included. So what is on the shelf, the cost is what you pay at the end of the day. Thank you so much for your insights. Really, really do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.